Okay, so I'm just going to read the public notice that was printed. Notice is hereby given that a public hearing pursuant to section 859-A of the New York State General Municipal Law as amended will be held by the Greene County Industrial Development Agency, GCIDA, on the 5th day of October of 2022 at 6 p.m. local time at St. Patrick's Church, 24 North Washington Street, Athens, New York, 12015. Flint Solar LLC, FMS, is a limited liability company constructing, owning, and operating a 100 megawatt AC solar voltaic PV facility being developed at the southern end of the town of Coxsackie and the northern end of the town of Athens. The GCIDA is proposing to provide incentives to the project in the form of a payment in lieu of taxes pilot, a sales and use tax exemption, and a mortgage tax exemption. The application submitted by the company and relevant supporting documents submitted to the GCIDA in connection with this project may be reviewed by the public on the IDA's website at www.greenida.com. Inquiries about the project and the GCIDA assistance should be directed to April Lentz, Executive Director. The GCIDA will, at the above stated time and place, hear all persons with views in favor or opposition to the rendering of financial assistance by the GCIDA for the project. Minutes of the hearing will be available to the public and members of the GCIDA. Once again, we'll be keeping the comment period open until October 28th at 4 p.m. And you can email me or mail those or drop them off to us at the end of the meeting. Thank you.
Yeah. Again, Paul Goldman, I'm the attorney for the IDA. We had extensive comment last time. We heard all you guys, and believe it or not, we've been taking it all down. Remember, we have a stenographer here, so I would ask you again, if you would speak, go slow. For those of you who weren't here last night, we had a lot of comment. I would ask again not to have it repetitive. You can put it in writing. We will consider it. Please give us the courtesy of that. We hear you. We are listening to you. I'm sure the applicant is listening to you, and your points are well taken. Now, the reason we're here in Athens, just so everyone knows, is that because part of the project lies in Coxsackie and part of it lies in Athens. So we're required to have a public hearing in both locations. So that's why we're here. So again, it's still the same project. You have comments on the project, the financial assistance. Please, make those comments, but please keep them succinct for the benefit of everyone. Thank you.
Okay. Our first speaker is Nancy Gifford. Would you? Okay. Come on up. I'll give you 6 minutes.
I practice this. I should get through in 5 minutes and 40 seconds, so you can time me out. I'm probably going to stumble, though, so forgive me. After last night's hearing and listening to some of the responses from your consultants and others, the defense of the IDA finding report, I need to reset the discussion we have tonight. Indeed, public hearings are to listen to the concerns and support of the community, and we all are learning from both sides of this conversation. Maybe we take away from last night, my takeaway anyway, is how the Article 10 solar projects are so new to New York State and indeed Greene County IDA in terms of the formula evaluations. I hear a struggle to put your arms around the best and fairly evaluate the role the IDA is required to do for the pilot. Al Kaplan last night, will be providing you with some more specifics on this and where we continue to disagree, but are willing to listen and learn from your experience and what you're doing. I think what the Sleepy Owl Lake for, what we're looking for is reflected in the recent article in the Times Union about the City of Hudson IDA, who indeed is challenging the way community benefits have been assigned by the IDA and come up with new ways to measure community benefits. We kind of think that may be at the heart of the issue here for us, and I'm going to talk about why that is the case. To that, I need to give you a brief review of Sleepy Hollow Lake activities in the last 7 years, particularly in developing our close relationship with Greene County to solve the perennial problem of hundreds of tax lots going to them. They pay the local real estate taxes. We lose all the fees and dues from those lots. It's been an ongoing problem for years and years and years. After a number of failed attempts with Greene County to solve the problem, and a number of schemes involving outside developers that had visions, I guess, of fast cash rich schemes. They both the county and the board at the time of Sleepy Hollow Lake agreed to those. They quickly failed. They were utter total failures. More lots, more empty property, and you can't have a real estate development unfinished with hundreds of lots literally available. As a developer, I put them out 10 at a time. Come and get them quick, they're gone. You can't say that about 400 lots at a time. I decided to run for the board, was elected, and brought my 50 years of land planning and development experience, a landscape architect, planner, and developer to the job, and define what was basically a real estate problem. The problem, the largest real estate payer in Coxsackie, Sleepy Hollow Lake, 25%, and generally speaking, was in trouble. We had not only hundreds of lots that we lost, but we had over 40 years not paying serious attention for maintenance and replacement of facilities that need to be done. We were in deep trouble and getting worse. We had notices about failure of our sewer plant for compliance. We continue to have lots of problems with our lake water turbidity, declaring basically a lake in trouble. So what we did basically was to become the major player that we had to be. And we also realized that the IDA over this period of time is a major player in the land use and economic development, not only our area, but the county. The IDA needs to know that this area's major taxpayer was in real trouble and floundering to find a solution. In the past 7 years, we've borrowed over $17 million, nearly completely rebuilding all of our infrastructure and amenities. We are a renewed community with a recent surge of the Hudson Valley real estate. We are well on our way to solving drastically and reducing tax lots and local burdens of development or delinquent real estate taxes in the county, and financial support for Sleepy Hollow Lake to remain solvent. Indeed, for the first time ever, we now this year fully funded our maintenance reserve requirements. We are funding our future doing out of current dues. We do have an ongoing problem, however, you should be aware. Sleepy Hollow litigation with towns, villages, and school districts over double taxation of our homes, yet again, common area property and open space to the community. We return to the court possibly early next year and believe we will prevail. We'll therefore be able to purchase the remaining county tax lots and turn them into open space with no tax obligations. Over 50 years ago, when Sleepy Hollow Lake was planned, there was no local zoning ordinances or subdivision ordinances, very basic preliminary ones. And what was allowed was a very dense lake, urban type community, of very poor soils that totally depended on public sewer and public water. Without it, we could not be where we are. So that starts this very problem of managing our watershed and therefore the quality of water in our lake. As we've repeated last night, and I'm not trying to back up things here, this is no fault to any of the current players that are here tonight, but our lake is our reservoir. It's a backup water system for the village of Athens. It is essential for us to be able to provide potable water to our 850 home community, which also demands that we have our wastewater treatment plant. Without this infrastructure, our community is not viable. As your own consultant pointed out last night, we are a DEC-defined impaired body water due to turbidity. This problem is linked directly to this watershed in which the solar projects are being proposed. We, Sleepy Hollow alone, it has this responsibility as fiduciaries. As we pointed out last night, state agencies are overwhelmed, short-staffed to provide adequate personnel and approval for new energy projects. And I'm close to finishing, but I will take another time, thank you. Let alone monitor new construction and operations. I point out in today's Times Union editorial yet again addresses this issue. And I point out that there, and I quote this, DEC has asked polluters to self-certify that their operations are clean. Really? We were told last night, maybe not to worry about this, the state's gonna review the changes, everything's gonna be hunky-dory. And it was in this process, I must admit, DEC did a very credible job. They were very transparent. They responded to all of us interveners. But I'm worried. I've been around state development. I've seen DEC disappear when we needed their help. Not that they wanted to, not that the good people there would ever want to do that. It's just a reality. It's what happens when you really run projects in the state of New York. As a matter of fact, most of the states in this country are my states. So maybe we get the review, maybe we don't. That's why we're here. Okay. We had no disagreements with the IDA and with our understanding of the value of solar projects. We stated that very clearly in our watershed. Indeed, with the severe limitations of the towns and villages surrounding us to provide the extension of their sewer and water system is part of the reasons we don't have other economic development. We're too poor to be able to do that. And this land use, we believe, is an appropriate land use for the farms that have stopped farming and being in the area. We believe that's essential that we have that agreement and understanding with you. But we've asked that we spend a little bit more time looking at what is the community benefits of this project and who gets what. I'm going to sum it up very quickly. We've averted the failure of Sleepy Hollow Lake and we'll continue to have to make millions or more of our own money investments to do the very things that Renee talked about last night. We're dredging, we're fixing drainage easements. We got dozens and dozens of more and years of more work. This is on top of paying back the 17 million we borrowed and funding the maintenance reserve. So we are taxed. So I'm going to cut it off here.
Hey, come on.
But let me just say, let me address, when you decided to give both towns the figures you had, we get no support in maintaining the watershed. We get no support for monitoring that we've asked for. We just asked that that re-examines, and we've asked the county to help us and perhaps sitting down and reviewing some of the specifics. I'll ask Al later on to address more specifics. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Ken.
Thank you, Kim.
No more need to give you your time.
Alfred Hackler.
No, we just want to make sure we got everybody in.
I don't have this in the speakers tonight.
Hmm?
Thank you, Al.
Okay, so I'm Al Kaplan from Sleepy Hollow Lake, chair of this SHL Solar Committee. And what I want to talk about tonight is I want to talk about some of the things that I didn't have a chance to talk about last night. And, but let me just say a quick word about last night's hearing. You know, over the last several months, I've been able to learn a lot in watching the IDA and getting a sense of what they do. And I have to say, I mean, I really believe that the Greene County IDA is very professional. They're doing great things for the county, and you know they are really trying to improve things in our county, particularly with a lot of the things that are in the works, and that's significant. I also have witnessed, on Zoom, etc., some of the hearings that they've held, and I can tell you, I mean, in addition to those hearings, I mean, I worked for the state for 36 years. I do a lot of advocacy for not-for-profits for the state, and I've been to hundreds of hearings. And last night's hearing, it was the first for me, and I think that's enough said. So let me just reiterate some of the aspects of what I wanted to talk about. SHL is not opposed to Flint, and people who think that just have not been listening or reading what we're saying. We're not opposed to the funds that the farmers are going to get in dealing with Flint. We're in favor of all that. We're in favor of solar, as Ken was saying earlier. But what we want is that recognition of our need and our specific need. And as I said last night, we're willing to trust, but trust has to come with verification. And from a legal perspective, as fiduciaries of that reservoir, there are things that we have to do in terms of monitoring what's coming into that reservoir. And that's just the way it is. The fact that costs money and that it's going to cost money because of an action that another party, another neighbor is taking, we're saying, we need to have a good neighbor here that's going to recognize the issues that they're creating for us. And as I said, trust but verify, be suspicious if they push back on your verification. So it was this sense coming from some of the folks who spoke last night about, you people, being people from Sleepy Hollow Lake. Well, I can just tell you, we're your neighbors. We live here. We pay taxes here. We work here. We volunteer here. We shop here. We eat here. We hire people from the local area, both as people to work for Sleepy Hollow Lake and people as contractors to work for the homeowners in Sleepy Hollow Lake. So, you people, I'm not sure what that's all about. But I want to talk about equity and fairness. So let's look at the pilot that DeShaw, and I'm going that D.E. Shaw is involved with. Okay, and I'm sorry if I'm going to be talking about some numbers and may take a little bit, but
your time expired, but do you have a lot more to go?
I have a couple more.
Bob's going to give up his time.
Okay, thanks.
I'll do 3 more minutes.
Thanks,
And again, anybody have the opportunity in the end, everybody's had a chance the first time
John
to
Flaw.
speak again.
Okay, so let me throw some numbers at you. I apologize. I'll try to summarize. So D.E. Shaw recently purchased Flint Line for $300 million, right? So the IDA had the issue of coming up with an evaluation of the valuation for tax purposes of this project, knowing that $300 million becomes the market value. Well, the first thing they do is.
I'm sorry, I'm having trouble hearing. Someone's talking.
I'll let you go. Go ahead.
So the IDA had to come up with a valuation to be able to do the pilot. Well, the first thing they did was normally they do 20 years for the pilot. That's their policy. Flint might ask for 30. They gave them 30. They said, okay, we're going to look at 30 years. So the first thing they do is they come up with what's called a discounted cash value. That essentially is the getting to a number that represents the assessment value that all of us would pay if we owned that property. So you and I pay this discounted value. So they came up with a value, and it's in the report, of $167 million. So that's if we were the owners, each of you were an owner of this project, you would be taxed at the rate of $167 million. Okay. But they look at that and said, well, that's a lot of money, and we want to. The state already said that they don't have to pay property taxes, and we're going to do a pilot. So there are other things we can use. Well, the state came up with a model. They call it the NYSERDA model. Now, there's a lot of controversy about that model because the town of Blenheim and some other towns are in a lawsuit, and there's some issues with the model. And their lawsuit says, well, that's too low. That gives too many benefits to these solar plants, solar developers. So anyway, the model that the state presented, the IDA did the work on it, came out with a valuation of $47 million, significantly different than the 167. It kind of gives you an idea why some of the towns are suing over that. Okay. Then they had to look at what Flint Line requested, which was about half the state's model. So in other words, if that's 47, let's say it's about 24 million. So now, from a valuation perspective, that's what Flint Line was asking for. Okay, so the property tax savings. So the savings that model would give you from the amount that we call the discounted cash model of 167. They're going to save 128 million from that. Okay, from the state model, they're going to save about 20 million. Right? And then if you add the town payments, which are not part of the pilot, they're a separate thing, then those numbers come down because you have to give them credit for that 12 million they're going to give the towns. So now the savings from the model that says what we would pay as taxpayers is only $116 million over 30 years. And from the state model is now 10 million, but still below that state model. So I thought, just because I know, sometimes it's not the easiest. I mean, I'm a numbers guy, so I want to just do a quick vision. That's this page is $300 million. Okay, if you have the whole page, that's the market value. Okay, everybody, whole page. Okay, this is 167. Okay, so that would be 167. You take away that. That's where you're beginning to generate some savings. Okay, now you go to the state model, the NYSERDA model. That's 47 million. Okay, so then you take away that, and that's how you get to those savings, because they're not having to pay that, and you're left with the state model. Well, but now you have their request, which the IDA has accepted. That's 23 million. Okay, so remember the big piece of paper. So that's how they're valuing this particular project. Okay. And I mean, it's just, I don't know, I hope that helped, give you a perspective. So, so the IDA, said, okay, we're going to accept Flint Mine's request. But there was one change, one significant change that.
You're over time.
You're way over time, my friend. We got to give everybody a chance here.
Anyone else yield their time to me?
Yeah. All right.
That's what I figured. Okay, thank you.
So they did one change to the model, which is they negotiated a $500,000 upfront payment to the IDA. Good negotiation. That's pretty good. But that's really the only change from what Flint Mine was asking for in their application to the IDA. So because of some of these changes and because they're not following some of their own policies, they had to file what's called a deviation notice. And they filed that with the county, with the towns, with the school district, just to let them know that they're not following that. So essentially what we have here is D.E. Shaw is involved in a certain way here because D.E. Shaw Renewable Investments bought Flint Mine. D.E. Shaw, as we've been saying, and I know people don't always like to hear this, is a $128 billion hedge fund today, based on the latest numbers that have been reported in the press. Now, they're poor guys, and they're only going to make probably, again, I don't know the exact numbers, but our calculations are they're going to bring in about $20 million a year in revenue for this project. And we all know that solar is not really an economic development aspect, and you can read that in the IDA's report. They say this is really not economic development. Aside from the initial construction jobs, in the pre-amended plan, they had one full-time equivalent job coming out of the solar plant. I don't know if the amendment changes that number one way or another. And this is the first big solar that the IDA is reviewing, the first big one that's coming in front of us. And right now, we're setting a precedent which is going to apply to all of the other big solars. I mean, that Hecate is looking at this and looking their chops in terms of what they think they can get. The county in this, they're actually going to end up with a net loss in revenue over the 30 years, which is unbelievable. But when you're looking at that kind of valuation, those things happen, and the sales tax and the mortgage recording tax essentially. And compared to what they would have gotten under the state model, the Coxsackie Athens School District over the 30 years is going to lose $16 million. Now that's just compared to the state model. Compared to that discounted cash, remember the 167? Everybody remember that? Compared to that rate, the school district's going to lose $91 million over the 30 years. So, look, I just want to make sure everybody puts this in perspective, that this is what's happening. We have people coming in, not economic development, making a lot of money, no matter how you slice it. And we question the equity and the fairness of the taxes. Now, these things do not include any of the federal income tax laws, the state NYSERDA subsidy that they'll be getting, or the state's portion of the sales. Those are savings on top. And to top it off, just from to plug our effort, they're telling us they can't afford to help Sleepy Hollow Lake, and that's that's their position. So it doesn't sound right to me. I don't think it's fair. I don't think it's equitable, and I'm concerned about what we're saying to everybody else. So in summary, I'm finishing. We believe they're shortchanging the county, the schools, SHL, and all the county taxpayers that are in this room that pay federal and state taxes. But thank you very much. Thank you for your time.
Just
You
to,
had to go to the microphone. So she can.
just want to clarify a few points on it, just because I think it's important where you want. You're referring to.
Point of order.
Is this at the grade?
No, I just wanted to clarify, some backup on this. We talked about deviation notice, that really deals with uniform tax exempt policy of the IDA, not the solar policy. Uniform tax exempt policy dates like 30 years now, I think. And every single pilot that the IDA has done forever.
I can't hear him. He's facing away from the microphone.
You need to put the microphone close to you.
On modeling.
So wait a second. So one at a time.
I just want to
Wait, just let
clarify
him-
some points and I'll let everybody else up.
Just want to ask a question on that point.
Yes.
Of that question. Does it follow the IDA solar policy?
No, it's a deviation from that.
Oh, okay.
Exactly. So, but it is, but we've also deviations are not unusual. I'm telling you.
Speaking of
That's
the
because it's an old policy.
Renee, you gotta slow down and one at a time.
On the modeling, just so everybody knows, the modeling wasn't done by the IPA. It's done outside independently for specifically the reason that we wanted to make sure that nobody could say, the idea didn't have that experience in order to do that. I think what's important here at the end of the day, is that you have to remember that the IDA wouldn't even consider benefits if it wasn't for the problem with but for what. And that is before getting the benefits, it would or would not happen. So I would just ask if somebody is aware of projects that have happened without any benefits, I would welcome that because I don't think we can find that. Right, wrong, or indifferent, whether they need these incentives, we could go back and forth all day. We all have different various opinions on that, but none of us feel, even as you noted in our own document, we've acknowledged this, okay? I would encourage, I don't want to get lengthy, but there's a couple these are very key points. You managed to nicely throw in the 500,000 to the IDA, but you didn't qualify that IDA. So let's qualify why we did it. In the document, we recognize that this project, unlike a factory or warehouse where tomorrow, well, I can tell you now, a bunch of contractors are working on that, Ferguson and others doing carpets, replacing glass, typical secondary and direct economy. We recognize that this would have none. That 500,000 is restricted to go into the IDA's economic development fund to build business parks to allow us to build further traditional projects that will bring tax benefit jobs in other communities. It's not something that's going in a bonus or a benefit or a salary. It's going very specifically restricted to offset the absence of secondary economic impact. And lastly, I agree with you on setting precedent for Hecate. Well, not lastly, but Hecate offered like $2,200 a megawatt in this. So I think Hecate, if anything, they are clearly not clapping in joy at 5,000 a megawatt. They're probably thinking they're in trouble, that they're going to be a little in trouble, in that, because I would expect to see that. So I think, again, I would encourage anybody in here in the room, we put a lot of time into that findings document. And it's very easy to select the cherry pick or mention parts, but I would ask everybody to take time and read through that finding statement, because each and every one, and I only felt obligated to kind of offer clarification only because I think everything I said today is in the finding statement, articulated clearly and accurately. Right. So let's make sure we're on the same playing field.
Who was that?
One second.
Whoa.
Al, can you just
Wait
come
a
back
second.
up?
Let's not
Speak
have
in
a
the
debate.
middle. We're not gonna have a debate, but I need
Clarify. what depends on what you want to say in after with that. I mean, let's, if you want to talk about the pilot payment, how many people here were last night?
Well, let's just stop the debate, and continue with the public hearing, please. Please, I understand, he wanted to clarify certain things. Let's continue with the public hearing, and that's enough. Al, that's enough. Let's just stop.
There's support for all these items. There's further clarification on all these. Let's move to the- There's further clarification on all these items that was presented.
I understand there are different points of view.
Okay, thank you, please.
Janet Kaplan.
April and everybody, I'm only here because, hi, I'm Janet Kaplan. I am the president of the board of Sleepy Hollow Lake. I submitted written and spoken, partially spoken comments last evening. And at the end, Renee commented on something. I said that there were numerous misstatements and misconceptions, put inconsistencies in the report that I had stated that, and asked me where they were. Well, they're in my comments. I was going to go through and hit every one, but I decided I'm not going to do that. I just want to talk about one that is a mischaracterization of what Sleepy Hollow Lake is asking for and what the budget that we submitted as a proposal is. The IDA has this, but I'm going to give you another copy. We submitted a budget primarily for testing and monitoring the lake as a result of Sleepy Hollow, Flint Mine's potential to increase the runoff and increase the phosphorus in the lake. The solar project, contrary to what some people think, they're not just sticking a pole in the ground. There's going to be tremendous disturbance of soil. And we don't know what's the half-life of all the chemicals that have been in there. So potentially it could be good, as Ken said, less phosphorus, potentially not. But we need to test and we need to monitor. We are testing now at our own expense to do baseline. We know where we are when the solar projects start. We submitted a proposed budget based on the initial Article 10 submission last year of $101,000. In the findings report, they stated that the majority of our budget is for mitigation and repair of existing drainage easements where we have a problem. That's not correct. We are repairing those at our own expense. It's a continuous problem. We do it all the time. And that actually, even at the majority of the budget, that's about $30,000 based on this. Now, it's just a budget. It's not an income and expense statement. It's a guess based on what we know and what we're expecting. And we expect that to be an annual cost to us. The other part of what we're asking is a misstatement that we are asking to take money from the towns or the school district, and we're not. We support the towns, we support the school districts. I think all the money should go to the school district. I think they really need it because the schools in Athens is rated right back below the middle statewide. The school district could use all the money, but they're not getting it, whatever. But we are not asking to take any money from that. We're asking the IDA to use its leverage in giving these enormous benefits to Flint Mine, or whoever the operator is going to be ultimately, to require them to with our monitoring and testing. And the rest of, I can give you copies of this budget. You have it already, but I'll give it to you now.
Is it attached to it again?
Yeah, you can
No, it was part of the original letter.
No, it's not attached to what I
Okay,
gave you
fine.
because
I'll log in.
We have copies.
I know you do.
Thank
You
you.
have copies. And that's it. I did it in 3 minutes, right?
Yes, thank you very much.
Rob Munkel, Sleepy Hollow resident for about 10 years now. So just a couple of quick things. The ecological cycle changes all the time, a lot of variables. Putting in a solar farm in the watershed, obviously has the potential to, add to those variables. So I guess the key question to Flint Mine is, have you done this type of setup that's close enough to, a lake? That's our, water source of drinking. Are there examples of that? How did you mitigate, catch basins, everything like that? So it's really a question of, what have you, done and experienced before, within New York State? I mean, this is by far well managed, lakes. It's our livelihood. And truth be told, not against solar, got it on my roof. So we're all pro solar for the most part. But the fact that it is in the watershed, and that question stands to Flint Mine to hopefully answer, what experience you have, in setting it up. So, thank you.
Would Janet Lyons like to speak? Oh, you did. Thank you. Robert Wellman. Giuseppe Moltari. Giuseppe, did you want to speak?
Not really, no, thank you.
No? Okay. Julie Foreman.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Julie Foreman. I live at 21 Van Houten Drive and I'm a member of Sleepy Hollow. The majority of the community is in full support of this Flint Mine project and the green energy that will supply to my livelihood at the lake, living here full time. I'm a member of your community. I pay taxes here. My daughter was just kindergarten teacher in the school district last year. So we're very invested in this community. With that being said, this project is being built on Murderers Creek, and Murderers Creek is a direct feed into Sleepy Hollow Lake. And Sleepy Hollow Lake is what provides my house the water that I drink, that I shower in, and that I also enjoy recreationally. So I'm asking that Flint Mine consider what we're asking for is that they continue to monitor our water to keep it clean, and that any runoff associated with this has been thought of carefully. And they're taking due consideration to make sure that our water stays clean. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jim Foreman. Okay. Scott Nomaker. Scott, am I saying it wrong?
No, that's
Okay.
no.
No.
Scott Nomaker. I live at 54 Manhattan, in Sleepy Hollow, have a home on the lake, and I spoke yesterday about the issue of phosphorus and the green algae and the like. I guess I would just, and this has been raised again, and I would ask, let me put a hypothetical. So we're doing the monitoring, and assuming that this goes through and folks are able to negotiate a monitoring, assistance. What happens if we find heavy phosphorus is coming up through the disturbance? What happens at that point? Who's responsible? This is a question I don't think it's been raised.
I think that I'll answer that question. If there's a violation of law, you have your remedies. That's as any citizen would have. It's not like we're going to enforce it, but if there's a violation of law, then you have your remedies. That's what would happen.
Okay, I'm just
answering the question.
Yeah, let me just make sure I understand. So in terms of a cost related to reprocessing the water before it gets to Sleepy Hollow, how does that work? How does that work? In other words, if you had to remove the phosphorus or reduce the level of phosphorus in the water, is that a Sleepy Hollow cost, or is that
The applicant, so like every other environmental permit that you get, it's like a compromise usually. You have some impact. And I'm not talking about ID anything, but any environmental permit usually ends up to be a compromise of some sort. The compromise is usually worked out to some solution everybody agrees on. But the applicant, if they violate or exceed what everybody agreed was you could do, then the regulatory agencies, DEC, Army Corps, and others. Right now, whether they ever enforce it or not, but the standards, the daily stormwater violation fee on it is 10,500 a day. Every day you're found in violation of that.
Okay, so
Okay.
phosphorus is
Now,
a
if
key
it's
part of what's.
right, so any of the
monitored.
environmental conditions that may or may not, that the state, the agencies, the environmental agencies that issued the permits that allow them to do that project, that's kind of falls under their preview.
Okay, thank you.
It was Renee Van Schack who responded. Okay. Is there anybody checked off on that sign-in sheet that wanted to see?
Circle back to everybody that deferred their time. Like we had Janet, Robert, Jim.
Wait, I have a Doreen Tuttle. Doreen, did you want to speak? Christian Ames.
I'm good.
Louis M. Brogno.
I'm fine.
Okay. Did you want to speak, Tom? No. Did you want to speak? Okay, come up to the mic.
Just address it.
Following state your name.
My name is Janet Lyons. I live in Sleepy Hollow Lake. And following up on this gentleman's concern, if there are found to be violations with this increased phosphorus or the increased contamination to the lake,
Slow down a little bit.
Yeah, slow down.
it's the responsibility of the Sleepy Hollow Lake owner to then remedy that problem? Or do I have to go and sue individually? Or do we have to sue as a whole, both the company who's fired to, the agencies that permitted it? Who does that? When you speak of remedy, I'm assuming you mean legal, which would be a lawsuit, which would take years. And you are at risk of putting 800 homeowners out. You are at risk of polluting the lake and taking away drinking water from both Sleepy Hollow Lake and possibly the town of Athens.
So if there's a violation of the permit conditions, and again, as you've noted before, we're answering a question just out of courtesy and because I've experienced, et cetera.
Okay.
I can tell you that pretty much 99 out of 100 permit violations that I have seen reported in my career have not come from a government source. They've come from private sources. They've come from neighbors. They've come from the people in on the block. And the system is well established, and I can tell you that we have had to meet our conditions as ourselves in doing permits. They do take it serious. Whether there's enough staff in this day and age to do it or not, I think that's a pretty impossible question for any of us to answer conclusively. But when Paul says the remedy, doesn't mean you got to go. It doesn't mean you have to immediately go to a lawsuit. When they're violating, and if you've been watching this, what's been going on up in Cohoes with Norlight, for example, it's been exactly this problem up there. And DEC has stepped in repeatedly, not the city of Cohoes, and forced them to do additional mitigation, hire compliance monitors on site. Is it enough or not? I'm not familiar with that project, but there's a local example in our area where there was a permit condition that was violated. The citizenry pointed that violation out to the regulatory agencies. The regulatory agency did their job, stepped up, realized you were in violation of the permit, and took actions.
Okay. Thank you.
Would anybody else like to speak? Well, come on. That's okay.
Yeah, just quick, while he's coming up, they can actually, I didn't think about this, they can revoke the permit. So if you're 2/3 of the way through your job, they pull your permit, that's not good for you.
Well, the Dunn Mine in Rensselaer is a perfect example of that. That permit is up for reevaluation. So that is, sometimes that's where government does actually act.
So if you don't mind holding a minute, I'll tell you another spot. If you go back to Research Times Union just a little bit, Port of Albany with, I'm trying to think of the oil company that was down there. They had their permit pulled recently on air quality violations down in the public housing down in downtown Albany off the port. Now they may have gotten, actually, the project kind of fell apart when oil got all up, but they did get a permit either pulled or not renewed because they were in violation of the air quality standards in the permit.
That's exactly why we need to monitor. And test, because we need to know.
Let this gentleman go. He's waiting patiently. Thank you.
Sure, I'll be glad to do that.
Thank
My
you.
name is Ken. My name is Chee, that's spelled C-H-E-E for the record. I live in 7210 Trail in Sleepy Hollow Lake. I just want to follow up on this wonderful person's comment and question. So my question is this. You have all these wonderful remedies for us in the event that something should happen to a water. I'm just curious, what is the time lapse between the original complaint and your remedy before we do harm to ourselves?
Okay, so answer to your question is, you really are talking to the wrong people. We're the agency that does environmental. I can tell you this, if you want to look at the documents Paul Goldman does on our end, if they default on a financial condition, the penalties are swift. They could actually lose all. So I'm just saying,
So
that I can't answer that.
I
DEC.
understand what you're saying, but I'm just making a comment,
Yeah.
a rhetorical question. In the event that something should happen, in the event that we alert you, in the event that you're so kind to offer all these menu of remedies to us, and in the meantime, what happens to our drinking water? What happens to the water that we rely on? What happens to the value of our property? I just need to know that time lapse. Because if you're talking about a week, I can live that. If you're talking about a month, maybe. If you're talking about a year, what am I going to do?
Well, as I noted,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Chief, we can't speak for the agencies because they would do it.
We can answer it in statements.
Did we get everybody on the first comment round
Did
first?
anybody else want to speak? Come on up. Yeah, how does the- Thank you, John. Just state it again, so.
My name is John Van Buren. I live in 12 Brown Bones Lane in the town of Coxsackie. First of all, I want to state that I am in favor of renewable energy resources. I'm a retired professional engineer from Central Hudson. At one point, I was involved in what we call generation planning, or how we develop energy supplies for our future. This is decades ago. But one thing I'd like to point out, in our economic analysis, which I participated in quite actively, we always took our payment of our fair share to the community into account. We included it, and I'm talking about all the taxes involved that in light of solar's perceived benefit to our society, we have decided to bypass a lot of these things. And I feel that there is a failure for Flint Mine, in this case, to pay their fair share. For details on the failure, please take a look at Al's testimony and some documents that were submitted last night. My real concern is the financial hardship to the people in Sleepy Hollow. Flint Mine is going to be building a facility that has the potential of damaging our reservoir, damaging our drinking water supply. We also act as the backup for the village of Athens. And how do we keep track of this? How do we make sure it doesn't get carried away, get out of control? We monitor. Now, who's going to pay for the monitoring? The IDA has decided that Sleepy Hollow Lake residents should pay for the monitoring of water to make sure that water is not contaminated by Flint Mine. Think about that for a while. Thank you very much.
At this time, would anybody else like to speak?
Everybody should be aware that every comment, written or otherwise, will be published in its entirety with a detailed response to that. Okay, so it's not everything you heard here tonight. There will be response. It'll be up on the website. The IDA will answer to it. And if there's things that the board takes into consideration, changes, and there'll be changes made, the finding statement. But so I think I would hope, and I said this last night to everybody, I would encourage everybody, who had the interest to come out tonight and to hear the questions. I didn't intend with Al to get into any debate or allude that he misrepresented or anything else, but there's further clarifications I feel in those documents that need to be heard. And since the purpose tonight is not for me to get up here and sell my end, but to listen to you. And knowing that most people in public hearings after 36 years relatively rarely follow up on questions that might have come up in their mind due to other speakers at a public hearing, I would encourage you, please, I would ask you, I'm in this community my whole entire life too. So I'm not an outsider. I'm born and raised in Coxsackie. My family's 150 years in Coxsackie. The Shacks are since 1649 in the Hudson Valley between Kinderberg and Coxsackie. So I'm not an outsider. And I would ask you as one of you to give us the respect and the courtesy to go back. You have the interest to hear the questions. I would ask you to have the interest to read the answers. Yes.
Yes, please. No.
This is more or less a question.
Just state your name and question.
My name is Lou Umberto. I'm 30 years old. We built in 1990. My question is, why wouldn't Flint Mines pay for this testing? With a project this big, why wouldn't they want to protect their interests? That's my question. Thank you.
Like everybody else. It comes really down against a simple fact that there are different agencies that have different roles and have different responsibilities. In this particular case, it was an Article 10 process, whether we like it, don't like it. I will tell you, as somebody who's local, who's always got my projects done based on my own merits, I'm not a big favor of the state settlement process. Take my voice away either. Okay, but there are those agencies, and they're really the ones that focus on any of those environmental water quality payment
I can't hear him.
these agreements as a result of
He's
that.
facing-
Those are 79 terms in it, and they're all things that the environmental review identified. So the idea, given we're only looking at our mission and mandate, is to look at the economics of it, not the environmental of it. That would be the agencies that you have to count on or rely on when you're told. They would be the agencies. Again, if it's a fiscal matter related to pilots or payments or otherwise, then it's our responsibility to follow through. Make sure that it's done.
Can I get back up?
Yeah, as long as good, we're all as long as we all learn.
If the IDA of Greene County represents all our citizens, of which I pay a lot of taxes, why wouldn't the IDA force Flint Mine, regardless of what, to put aside a fund every year to pay for its testing? It's a huge project. A project that was valued, that they paid $300 million for. And now they want to be taxed on between 167 million down to 24 million, or whatever it might be. There's an economic value in it for Flint Mines to at least set aside and pay for this additional testing that Sleepy Hollow Lake requires. Period. That's our only way to prove our case. I'm sorry. IDA should be protecting us. Thank you.
I think all the comments will be considered by the board. And, so I can say to you honestly that, we're going to respond to each of the comments. The board may elect to do that, may not. It's really up to the board, but your comment will be considered.
The board being
members of the Greene County Industrial Development Agency. Thank you.
So the public meeting is over. Okay, Michelle, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
You get on the record.
Oh, wait. You're part of the record?
Yeah.
Okay, we're still recording.
Okay.
Yes.
You referred to the process, and that's where all these stipulations were. When we were intervener in the Article 10 process, I wasn't president of the board at that time. Ken was maybe chair of the solar committee at that time. And we had an agreement with Flint Line, we created one, and when we raised the issue of expenses for off-site monitoring, they said, oh, now's not the time to do it. It's Article 10, don't do it. So, okay, and we went away, we did our little thing, and here we are. And now they're saying, or you're saying, now's not the time to do it. Now we're asking for assistance to do this, and you're saying now's not the time to do it. Well, when would we have been the time to do it? They told us, Flintline told us specifically, not during the Article 10, so here we are. That was a rhetorical question
Yeah,
too.
no, I think,
I just want to
Janet,
get it on
I didn't
record
say
because
this
that-
isn't the time. I said this isn't the agency.
All right, same thing, same
Not
thing.
really.
It really is, it really is. And that was a rhetorical question.
Yeah, I know.
You don't have to answer.
Thank you.
My email address is Ernst, so it's ERNST @Greene with an E, so GREENEIDA.com. I'm going to show everybody's from, so last chance. Okay, I'm going to conclude the meeting. Thank you for coming. And once again, the commentary is open until October 28th. So we have time before our November board meeting, before I present it to the board. Okay, thank you.
I've got a draft.
Okay, now I'm going to wrap it up, Michelle. Thank you.
Thank you, April.